For our next talk, we have a topic that is both futuristic and very present on how will drones revolutionize healthcare and transportation. We have Lavanya Marla to give a brief introduction. Lavanya is an associate professor in the Department of Industrial and Enterprise Systems Engineering at the University of Illinois. She uses operations research and artificial intelligence to create adaptable logistics and transportation systems, prioritizing critical service resilience, logistics efficiency, emergency medical services improvement, environmental sustainability, and transportation innovation. Lavanya's research pursuits aim for advancements in cost, efficiency, robustness, and environmental impact of transportation systems and logistics. It promises to be a very interesting talk. And with that, I would like to invite Lavanya Marla on stage.
Good afternoon, everyone. So I realize I'm probably the person standing between you and lunch. Okay, so I'll try to make this as quick and engaging as possible. And so I want to have a lot of interaction with you guys. What I want to talk about today is how drones are changing healthcare and transportation. Those are the two domains I work on, and so I'll point to that. So the idea I want to really throw out here is not simply just the design of a drone. All of you have seen drones flying around, taking pictures, all of that. What I want to look at is how drones can be used to revolutionize and change systems, our societal systems, for the public good. Everybody has faced issues of not being able to access healthcare at the right place at the right time, or facing a lot of transportation congestion. So, or not being able to receive your packages on time, or different services on time. So what I want to talk about is exactly that. How do we actually use these new technologies in a way that our societal systems of different kinds can actually be improved? And what does it mean to actually design the system with this new technology on top of it? So I'll give you an example of how emergency healthcare in particular, it's one of my favorite examples, how that can be transformed using these new technologies of drones. And then I'll give a few more examples on package delivery, traffic surveillance, etc. But I'll go a little bit deep into the first example and just give you a few ideas about the other examples. So I'm assuming everyone has seen drones. And we all have seen how our existing infrastructure works across the world, whether you're talking about road infrastructure, whether you're thinking about healthcare infrastructure, your emergency services, which move across a network. All of these are the lower gray circle that you see. And now you have these new technologies which add to the amount of mobility they provide to these systems. So how can they be leveraged? And what I'm going to posit is it's not simply new technology. What you need on top of it is intelligence, intelligent ways to combine new technology and old technology, and intelligent ways to engage humans, which are in the center of the picture there. How do we actually engage humans as well in these systems? And in order to engage these three pieces, existing technology, new technology, and humans, you need intelligence, new designs, and what do those intelligence really entail? How many of you have heard about this? ICMR, Indian Council of Medical Research, has actually used drones to get tuberculosis samples from rural areas in Himachal Pradesh when they were snowed out. There was a way a human could take a motorbike, navigate the narrow areas in the snow, which would take at least 2 days, with additional snow, probably longer, get the samples from that remote village, then bring them back to the main city for testing, figure out if there was a tuberculosis outbreak in that village, who had that from each of the samples, and then send back the information and potentially medicines and other stuff back to the village. So essentially, it would be like 2 round trips of minimum of 2 days each. And what ICMR did was actually to take this drone, sit in the city. There was visual line of sight. They sent the drone from this city area across the hilly area and sent the test tubes and collecting the samples. It took 26 minutes from the main city. Send the drone there. They collected the samples. There was a healthcare worker sitting there who collected the samples from all the people that were involved or suspected. Then they packaged up the samples, sent them back. The testing was done. They figured out, was there an outbreak, who was affected, what were the medications, send the medications. Within a matter of 4 hours, they had the test results and they could ship out the medications. So instead of taking about a week, the whole process took a matter of a few hours for diagnosis and a few more hours for actually sending out the medications, right? So this is what we are looking at. The power of new technology is great. But what was involved in making this a success? One was the technology to test something. We have that technology sitting on, let's say, the city. You have the new technology, which is the drone, which makes your transportation, say, 5 times faster. And then you have the humans sitting at the other end, like the healthcare workers and the others, who are actually making this technology accessible, collecting the right information at the right time, providing it back to this drone, sending it back. So you have this amalgam of different systems, and I want to talk about this, socio-technical systems, which combine existing infrastructure, new technology, and the human aspect of it to make it a success. And there's also this super cool idea which has been used in Africa, in Rwanda in particular, called zipline. They send blood and other medical samples through drones. So they've got actually a design through which they can propel drones. It's like almost like a catapult mechanism. They give the drone extra momentum. It goes, and it's able to navigate and drop the blood samples and other things off at the right places. So we have these, especially in less accessible areas. We have drones doing a fantastic job. They're able to reach places where humans cannot. They're able to do that much faster. Now we're looking at how do we do that in areas like India. And not only in India, many countries across the world, Sweden, Canada, and now the US, have been looking at how do you actually use drones for cases where an ambulance or emergency response cannot reach us fast. How many of you have actually seen an ambulance stuck in traffic? Okay, a lot of you, right? So what if that ambulance was actually trying to target somebody who had a heart condition or a stroke, and they needed care within an 8-minute time frame from the time they experienced that condition? And the ambulance is stuck in traffic or cannot get there in time. Perhaps they're in a rural area or they're in a congested urban area. So this is exactly what happens. Now we have this new technology, drones. So what do? Can you send the drone to that person's home? Perhaps you have drones designed across the city, and perhaps you can send the drone there. What do you need to make it a success? Suppose you can send the drone to that person's house, and you have these nice little compact defibrillators or EpiPens, or cases where if the person needs an injection in an urgent way, you can send all of that stuff. Along with sending it, what do you need? Suppose you send it to that person's house. The drone landed there, and it deposited the equipment. What else do you need to make it a success? Is it enough to have equipment to treat the person? Okay, you need possibly a trained person to actually use that equipment. So what is happening is people have been designing apps through which volunteers, people who are trained in CPR, basic ideas. You don't have to have a trained nurse, but people who know how to deliver first aid well, right? And in communities, for example, in Hyderabad, people have been actually designing these systems of how do you call a volunteer across from your nearby neighborhood, right? Just on an app. So now let's say, along with sending the drone, your 108 system or 112 system has this idea of saying, I'm sending a drone, I'm also pressing the button to call a volunteer to that particular address, right? So now you have two entities which are going to that patient and saying, we are going to provide the service that's required. So how is the system going to work? When both these different service units, one the drone, the second the human, arrive at the location, that's when service can begin, right? So this is what we're looking at. You can have improved survival rates of human beings who've had heart conditions, strokes, and others by actually sending these different servers, a human and this advanced technology of a drone, to combinedly service somebody. And maybe the ambulance is still stuck in traffic, but it's going to come a bit slower. Meanwhile, the patient can be stabilized. What happens is that these defibrillators, for instance, have been designed in a very clever way. They're very light, and they've been also designed in a way that if they're placed on the chest and the button is pressed, for a person who actually has a heart condition, it triggers the electrical impulse. But if not, if the heart is already functioning, it does not trigger that impulse. So what happens is that there is safety ensured and inbuilt into the system. And simultaneously, you have a trained provider. So you have this idea, when you look at this graph here, you have a human being rushing to the place, administering that first aid, and the person has been stabilized. They have the immediate knowledge to say, has this person regained some level of functionality? Meanwhile, the ambulance comes, picks them up, and takes them to the hospital. So we are not eliminating that second step of taking them to the hospital. We are then moving them to the hospital. So you have this system which is a collaborative system. Like I said, social, technical systems which are collaborative, which actually look at the combination of these systems. And when we design this, it turns out, and what this figure is showing you is, if I have ambulances placed in a certain way across your city to maximize response, and all of a sudden I start throwing drones into the picture. I place them at various locations saying, oh, this is the rate at which I know people need service in this region, and so on. It's not enough to just say, I'm going to place ambulances and drones based on that response rate. It turns out you actually have to take the human element very, very carefully into account. You see the lower two figures. If you consider that the human, the bystander or the volunteer is actually available all the time, that means as soon as you call them, they will arrive, then there's a certain way I will design the system. But if I say there's a certain probability, a chance, or they are slower to arrive, you're actually capturing the fact that humans can be slower. Humans can hesitate when doing CPR or first aid. And humans may not be available when you think, when you need them, because they might be serving other people, or they might have just traveled for something. Once you start to say, I am considering the availability of human beings at that place, at that time, in this entire system, then you actually have to change the design of the entire system. It's not simply enough to say, I have this original design, let's just layer something on top of it. It turns out you need to actually redesign entire systems. The entire network, where your ambulances are placed, where your drones are placed, together combined with how humans are responding in each region. What we've seen demographically is in certain regions, humans are faster to respond. Maybe the population is younger. Certain other regions, humans are slower to respond. That could be based on maybe it's a less residential area, people are more commercially involved, therefore they cannot quickly respond. Or people are of a more age demographic, they will take longer time to respond. So essentially, when you start to combine the human aspect along with the technical aspect, You have to redesign the system. And that's what we're looking at here. When we don't have drones, we found that in this example, and we actually have data from Canada, but I cannot show that here. If we do not have drones, the maximum service level, the number of people that can be served in that threshold time as quickly as we need is about 75%. You'll have some regions that remain uncovered in the threshold, which if I start to increase, the number of ambulances even, I can only reach about 85%. But if I start to add drones into the picture, I can reach up to 95% of the population that is experiencing these conditions. And we're going to actually even start to consider that the speed of how humans respond in different areas, whether it's urban, semi-urban, or rural areas, depending on distance, depending on demographics, it's different. Then you start to say, how many drones do I need to actually complement the way humans are responding, or how fast they're responding? And that tells me, if I have 7 drones versus 6 drones, how much faster do people have to be? So that we actually want to reach the metrics that are required by that particular population, right? And if I know that bystanders or these volunteers respond in an uncertain way, there is a certain amount of variance in how they respond, we actually find that if we don't capture that error in how they respond, we actually make a lot of mistakes. But if we are able to reasonably capture that there's a probability of how they arrive and the speed at which they arrive, if we make less than 10% error in that, we are still designing the system well. But if we are making more than 25% error in how humans are engaging with the system, then our performance drops tremendously. So what we are looking at in terms of this is, it's not enough to say, OK, let's bring this new technology in and the problem is solved. In fact, now we have to ask a more deeper question. How do we have to train people, engage them well? What is the rate at which people need to be responding in different areas, and sensitizing them to this problem, increasing awareness to say, when these calls come, how do people respond? Or to increase actually the speed of response, we train more people so that they remain engaged with the system, and people who are experiencing emergencies can get faster response. So I want to pause there for a second. If there is any questions about emergency response, ambulances, if there's a question or a comment that somebody from the audience wants to make. Yes.
Hello everyone. I am writer Ritesh Aire from Pune, India, and college student. Madam, my one question of the develop of robotics and artificial intelligence of most popular company name of drone and develops company of the world.
So there are several companies,
Yes,
and it's hard to name some of them. I can tell you some of these offline, but we don't want to pick on a particular company and say that is the best technology, because really the drones and different purpose drones have different kinds of capabilities here. So I can talk to you after the talk to give you some more details here. So, but there are plenty of companies, including here nearby in Bombay. There are also lots of them based in Chennai, Hyderabad. Depending on the purpose, an agricultural drone will behave differently than a medical drone, will behave differently than a package drone. Okay, so there is no one company that is going to do the best on all the fronts, right? So depending on the purpose, it will change. I think we lost the slides here.
Good afternoon, ma'am. This is Krish. I'm really sorry for the question I'm going to ask. So this could be a failure on my part of understanding. But ma'am, if the bystander is going to the patient, why do we really need drones in this case? Because the bystander could carry the whole material and...
That's a good point. One question is, if we have limited equipment, right? For example, specialized equipment like the AEDs, defibrillators, are actually quite specialized. You cannot distribute them to the extent that you require. Remember, you're trying to train as many people in the population to be volunteers, right? Would you be able to provide every one of them with a defibrillator? Probably not. So what you need is for the specialized equipment to be carried by some of these new technology, like drones. It could be ambulances. Ambulances, of course, carry them. That is why you want this specialized equipment to be placed in certain places. Your college will have an AED, a defibrillator. There will be a glass case around it. Because in these kind of public institutions and so on, it's mandated, right? This is where you need, if there is necessity and there is a concentration of the population, this is where you place these kind of facilities, the specialized facilities. But you cannot distribute them too much. And they're very expensive as well. So you want to have the right balance between the cost, where it's placed, how far it needs to go, right? That is exactly where intelligence comes in. I'm very glad you asked this question. This is where artificial intelligence is used. The mathematics and the algorithms are designed in a way to say, where should I place what, knowing that people will respond in a certain way, and knowing that I can take things there at this speed in a certain way, right? You're really trying to match both in time and in space. And that's why it's challenging, right? You think about a spatial region, like the grid I drew, you'll see that you have to match things in time and space. And that's where which drone is available where, when, and where the humans available, the volunteers as well. Okay, that's a really great question. So you did not apologize. And yes, you have another question back there.
Hello, ma'am. My name is Arjun. I'm in 6th grade. So I have a question that instead of sending an ambulance and a drone, if we just send an air ambulance, it will save time. Then by an air ambulance, just we'll reach the patient in 20 minutes, and by the ambulance in 40 minutes.
That's a really good point, and we have been using it. But air ambulances are very expensive also, right? So we only have, even in the most biggest cities, we only have a handful of air ambulances. But rate at which emergencies occur in the city are much, much higher. So sending an air ambulance is actually going to be tremendously more expensive. That's why we're using drones, are much cheaper technology. Very good question. Okay, how many of you have seen packages come by drones? What happens in that case? If you have, let's say, a FedEx truck or a post office truck, they have a drone sitting on top of them, right? The truck is going. What they do is they send, as they're passing by the region, the home that they're trying to deliver to, they are maybe on the next road. They dispatch the drone with the right package. The drone goes till the person's house, drops off the package, comes back to the truck, right? Which means that the delivery company has to own trucks, it has to own drones, and it has to have the right intelligence to send the drones to the homes at the right times. What I'm going to propose is a solution where we reduce congestion. We reduce the need to have both trucks and drones owned by the same company. So we're going to have drones that hitchhike. Let's say the drones are placed at various locations owned by the post office or by governmental organizations or, say, FedEx locations. What will happen is the drone starts off with some packages. It goes, lands on buses or public transport vehicles. Till some extent, it takes the path, sits on top, takes the path by that public transport vehicle, and then it gets off where needed and drops off the package. Maybe it takes even 2 buses. Let's add to that. Instead of just that, suppose you have lots of Ubers and Olas driving around. And the Ola drivers start saying, OK, I'll make the roof of my car available for packages, right? I create a small grid kind of thing where a drone can land, and I'm going to give you space. All you do is create space. As the Ola driver is driving and they make their route available, the drone says, oh, I've got this available. So I can, instead of using only the public bus transport, I'm going to use real-time data of time and space for taxis that's made available. I'm going to utilize that. Just jump onto that, until the time that I need it. Then get off, and then maybe use another vehicle. So you have this more in real time. As these taxis are traveling and they know their routes based on their passengers, they say, okay, I'm making myself available not only to passengers, but also to packages. And so, as we have this, we are going to, in real time, that information is made, and you can build the algorithm to say, how do I design the routes for the drones and the times as well to make almost same-day delivery a reality, right? So from the depot in the city to the various locations around the city, instead of taking 2 days, you can do that within a few hours. So you make these things much, much faster. So instead of drones being tied to certain vehicles owned by the delivery companies, now you're saying, let them hitchhike on publicly available vehicles. And that brings a nice idea to say, we are going to even reduce the number of trucks that are present in the city. So you reduce congestion. Another idea that drones are very useful in is in traffic surveillance and patrolling. We all know that there can be pockets of congestion and traffic occurring. So you can have drones looking at certain drones placed in certain areas for control. They are measuring, monitoring, and providing charging stations. Other drones are traveling around, looking at traffic, measuring it, looking at how to disperse the traffic, but then they come back and report to the control drones and travel around. So you can see that control drones stay there, but you have a red route and a blue route on the right-hand side, where the other drones travel, collect information about what's happening where, at what points in time, monitoring information across the city, and bringing back that information. So when you're looking at large cases where you want to disperse traffic, where you want to know, even for large crowds, you're collecting information as to what's happening where, is there safety, measuring that, or even for disaster management, you want to create this idea of drones that can go, surveil and patrol, take pictures or whatever is needed, collect information, bring it back to other locations where it's useful. So you have some other drones which are just control points. And then you're feeding that information back to a centralized place where you, again, have the intelligence to manage this entire system. So for example, you'll see in the bottom right picture, you'll have 2 control UAVs, and then you have some trips around that. You can have trip 1, trip 2, trip 3, trip 4, which are done by service UAVs, which are traveling around for surveillance, disaster management, collecting information, and so on. And you have each of these routes associated with some of these control drones. Another thing I want to bring in, maybe some of you have thought about this so far, drones are very sensitive to wind because they're traveling around, and a small amount of wind also can affect how much uncertainty is experienced by the drone, so how fast it travels. And along with it, because if it's a headwind, then the drone is going to slow down considerably. So what we are also looking at is that drones can be used, while they're used to collect information, they can be used to collect information to make travel easier for other drones. So you have some drones which are actually collecting information about different parts of the road network, different parts of the air network in each city. Other drones can say, oh, that drone just traveled there, it collected information, so I'm going to avoid that area because it's experiencing a lot of extra headwind, and I don't want to waste my battery. Whereas if they find good routes, then other drones can say, the drone that went before me collected this information saying these are the good routes, so I'm going to actually use that information to travel on the good routes. What this will tell you is actually measure the kind of uncertainty that's happening in the air. So we actually use this. To, can you plug in the computer? I think it's running low on battery. So we actually start to say, how can drones be used for information collection in a way that can be useful for other drones so that they're more efficient, don't lose charges quickly, use more efficient routes, faster routes to serve people. Like, for example, you want the emergency service drones to go really fast. before the drone goes, if other drones are already collecting information about the entire airspace, then these drones can go much faster, right? And that's essentially, so you have this notion of control drones, you have service drones, which actually give you the service, and then you have these helper drones, which collect information. So you have a combination of different kinds of functionality that the drones can provide, right? And you, along with all of these, given that drones such a cheap technology, what you can do is combine these different functionalities to say, how do you collect the intelligence that's needed to make the overall system a success? The combination of the existing technology, drones layered on top of it, and then humans. So I'll stop there. I made the talk short simply because we can have a lot more interaction here. So I'll let the audience come up with questions.
Hello, ma'am. My question was regarding the implication of drones. You told it can be used for the medical delivery. So I wanted to ask that we can develop the technology necessary for the use case. But how about the how we can develop the social ecosystem around it? How training the bystanders, and it is also very important. And in a very populated country like India, it is like we can do it over here, but with a less density population like the European nations or the Australia, like countries such, there is more need of drone-like systems over there. So how will you approach this issue?
That is a wonderful question. And this is where, again, like you pointed out, the human aspect becomes important. Sometimes, so in fact, a lot of these countries are putting, especially into practice, community awareness programs. So actually bringing in the notion of how can neighbors, for example, come by quickly, and how do you actually involve more people in these programs, right? Raising awareness, then saying, making people and convincing them that they need to get basic training. And additionally, saying that by doing that, they're being good Samaritans. They don't actually incur any liability. They're not held accountable for what the outcome may be, because they're doing their best as well, right? So there's almost like a threefold notion of this. One is raising awareness, saying that how people need to know what happens and the fact that this system is being rolled out. Second, training the people. And training the people is not very difficult because they are, as long as people participate. So actually using word of mouth, using other possibilities to say, how do you involve and engage more people? So what we found is, if you start to engage beyond a certain point, then more and more people are interested. So you need to get to at least like a 30% level of engagement. Then more people start to say, this system is probably going to work. Let me also do it because my friends are doing it, right? So you want to create a social network through which people get engaged in this. Finally, the third one is to actually tell them that the liability is low, because what they are doing is following the instructions that have been sent. Once the equipment comes there, they are following it exactly as instructed, and therefore they do not have any negative outcomes for them, right? Depending on what may have happened to the patient later.
My name is Rolf, and I think my question is two parts. One is, just as you've seen that the mic is not working here in this hall, just imagine if there's lack of a signal, say in a remote area, like say a jungle, where there's obviously an accident, someone has met with an accident there. How do you get a drone in terms of topology?
Yeah.
Second, in terms of weather. Okay. Now you've spoken about wind.
Yes.
But I'm talking about fog.
Yeah.
I'm talking about rain. I'm talking about low visibility.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the questions are two. One is in terms of topology, like where there's no signal, or for example, like this mic not working. We see sometimes our phones not working in places which are just outside Pune.
Yes.
Or
Yes.
probably in a lift.
Correct.
So how does this, have you done some studies, and what is the feasibility in terms of such situations?
That's a really good question. Like I mentioned, the ICMR example, drones have actually been shown to be very successful in certain kinds of weather conditions, including certain kinds of fog, right? I wouldn't say all, but certain conditions, drones have visibility due to how the technology that's being used. For example, if they are equipped with infrared, others, and so on. And the other thing is a lot of drones at the moment which are licensed to operate are operating within a visual line of sight. So you have humans which are able to see to a certain extent, right? And the drone cameras help the humans see further. That is the extent to which we are looking at in terms of radius of drone operations, right? Again, this is mainly not because the drone cannot operate, but because we're giving it that buffer. We want the kind of reliability that you're exactly speaking about. So that's why we are trying to keep it within that. What it tells us, and that's where I'm talking about the intelligence and the algorithms then told us, if you want that kind of design, spread the drones bases for the drones where humans are located across the city. So actually have more drone bases across the city than ambulance bases. That means you spread them across more so that drones can reach more people. So you have a larger spread for the technology that can reach faster but shorter distances. So you're combining one technology that goes faster but shorter with another technology like the ambulances that goes slower but longer distances. This is the kind of combinations through which you can actually make the overall system more efficient. So that's the kind of question that we're looking at. In terms of the uncertainty, that's absolutely right. That's where I brought up the element of human uncertainty. We are modeling that same thing in terms of the drone uncertainty as well. And remember, in order to make this entire system work, we are also dispatching ambulances. We are not saying only the drone and the volunteer will serve. We're also dispatching ambulances as the backup. So we are actually having multiple layers that are working together.
My question is, are we thinking about drone as a service? What I mean to say is, suppose I'm hiking in the mountains or going on an off-roading drive. So I would like to know what is the current state of the road because of a high tide, yes, or because of increasing vegetation, because of more rainfall, yes, and things like that. Everyone cannot afford buying it. Yes. But drone as a service, are we thinking of this option as well?
Absolutely. That's why I showed you that picture of this one, where drones are actually traveling around a city. You have the service drones, and then you have the control drones. The service drones are doing exactly this kind of surveillance, collecting information across different roads, different parts of the network, and sending it to control, which again allows that information to be disseminated across populations, doing other things, saying which roads are, again, in real time, which roads are becoming closed, where is there, say, flooding. Even in short periods of time, you'll notice that some areas, if the drainage is not good, you'll see lots of water piling up. So you can actually get very close to your travel. You'll say, OK, we want to stop this road, or we want to use that for half an hour even, we want to block this road, right? These are the kind of information that you can get much, much faster using drones.
Sorry, my question was twofold. One was, this is pushed information to me, yeah, right? I want to pull information, meaning specific routes I want drone to go and check out. So that kind of thing.
Yeah, that is actually harder to do. What we want to do is do it at a city level, for example, or across, let's say, certain highways. This is where you need some amount of centralized intelligence to say, where do we want to do the patrolling and why? At the moment, these decentralized kind of systems are fewer. The one that you're asking about, those are fewer. But hopefully we'll get there. Again, it depends on proof of concept. Once we start doing the proof of concept from the centralized level, which is the most bang for the buck, once you start doing that, then you can start to say, I want to demand information. There you can do things like creating apps for saying, where do people want information? Where do they think they will travel? And therefore, we will collect that information, right? Yeah, absolutely.
Hello. Hi, Lavanya. This is Prashant from MIT University. So first of all, thank you for your wonderful presentation and jumping into the recent topic of drone. I have two questions. Number one is, a lot of things are happening in the context of drone, and the security is the main concern. What if the drones are being controlled by the third persons? That's the first question. The second question in the domain of healthcare. So when we are talking about the drones who are doing even the operations nowadays with the consultancies with the doctors, are we losing the privacy of the health records or users' privacy or specifically the patient's privacy? Two questions. Thank you.
These are really good questions. The first one that you said in terms of security, um, at the drone level, there are control algorithms sitting on the drone itself. That's where we want to deal with the security also. One is security, navigation, these kind of things are done by the algorithm sitting on the drone. And there are ways to look at it. And like I said, in answer to the previous question, we do have humans that are sitting somewhere and operating because of the visual line of sight that we are proposing so far. Therefore, what we're going to say is if the drone is actually, to make this a reality in the near future, if the drone is actually not behaving the way it is doing, it's navigating in a different direction, then you have a way of controlling quickly, or at least detecting it quickly, right? That's number one, you have a human check. Along with it, there are algorithms that are actually looking at individual drone security. I don't work on precisely that. Like I said, I work on the socio-technical component, but there are. I can give you some pointers to that and where to look at that. So that's for your first question. Your second question was about privacy of information, right? And that is a challenge that is not restricted to drones alone. Even today, even with ambulances and other kinds of services, unfortunately, that depends on regulation. How much that information is actually stored and saved is the question there. And there are certain rules, for example, in the Western countries on how much information and to what time can that information be saved. For example, where did the patient call from? Where was the incident? What type of incident? Who was the person who experienced it? Who was the person who called? All that information is saved only until a certain period of time. Otherwise, it's masked, right? That means what they say is, this is some demographic information, location information, let's say it's stored up to, say, 50 meters, but not specific locations, right? So you start to actually remove as much information as possible that is identifying. What we call PII, personally identifying information, is removed as soon as possible, right? As soon as the service is delivered and the patient is taken to the hospital, you want to remove that. That is a bigger regulatory question. That is, again, not restricted to drones alone, but almost every system. I was on a panel for AI for social good yesterday. That is not simply for this one. Even if you're looking at tuberculosis adherence, for example, removing the notion of which patient is doing taking medicines or not, or penalizing accordingly, should actually be removed from any system. And that's where a government needs to come in to say, are these being followed? One, what information is saved, to what extent, and is that being followed? Are they actually implementing that, which unfortunately a lot of systems don't, right? Especially in India, I've seen that. So that's somewhere where government needs to step in and put in the rules and look at how the information, which information is saved and which is actually destroyed. Ensure that.
Okay, so I have a layman's question. So the way we are looking at drones right now, the base level we are looking at would be scale, right? It needs to be scalable. Yes. And with respect to that scalability, I mean, it needs to be run on a software because all of that IoT data and all that needs to be done. What is the latest on that? What is the open source part of it? What is closed source? What is like the Android kind of stuff that is going on with respect to that? Because ultimately it will all be reliant on that algorithm as well as the software, and everything will be defined on that, right?
Yeah, great question. So there are two levels of that software. One is the intelligence that's sitting on the drone itself, right? The other is the one that is sitting at the system level. Some centralized information saying what information is pushed to the drone to help it navigate, to tell it what to do next, right? What is its next activity? Which patient does it go to, or does it return to some other place to wait, right? Does it replenish equipment? All of that information. So there are two sets of algorithms. I'll talk about the bigger one, the overall system one. That, a lot of it is centralized, and what we are doing is exactly building that intelligence, which a system like, let's say, 108 can use on its servers, right? This is actually, these problems mathematically are NP hard, very, very difficult to solve. Again, not only given, because we have these three layers of people, drones, and ambulances involved. But even if you had only one kind of service delivery system, these are complicated in themselves, right? They are not easily solvable. So the intelligence that is used to build all of this is something that we are developing as we go along. In fact, some of our recent papers have talked exactly about this. And what they are talking about is, again, this notion of how to distribute resources. Ambulances in a certain way, to complement them, drones in a different way, which really complements, which is one is spread little, the other one, like I said, is spread farther. I'm giving you only rules of thumb, but actually the algorithms go as deep as in real time tell each drone where they should move, what they should drop off, how long they should wait, and where they should come back to, right? So they're as deep as that in a sense. I can tell you more, but that's really, at a nutshell, what they really will tell you to do, right? And also with the ambulances similarly, where they should be moving? Are there enough humans in the system at each point in time? All of these things are being kept track of.
Good afternoon, I guess. So I actually have two questions. My first question being is, when you talk about how drones can help in healthcare and first aid response by dropping off important medical equipment, so all this was contingent on the fact that one, drones can reach on time, and two, um, the human factor, right?
Yeah.
The humans can do what medical professionals can do.
Yes.
So my question is that there is a reason why, right? Medical practitioners work and study and intern for like a decade at least on an average to just do a basic surgery or basic first aid. So don't you think by simultaneously telling someone that he or she doesn't have any liability or at least low liability, and also training them just a little bit and decentralizing the ambulance system, don't you think it's actually more dangerous? Dangerous in a way, because the person might actually die because of unprofessional help that he would receive by this notion of that since the equipment can reach early, then yeah, that just wraps it up.
Okay, okay. Yes, there is, what we want to do is de-risk these kind of systems, right? Absolutely. This is where the training comes in. One is designing of the equipment in the right way. What people have done now is design defibrillators that are small, compact, and just require the pressing of a button. That's one, so you've made the equipment de-risked. So the second is you talked about the uncertainty in the drone. Since we are doing this visual line of sight system and we are also looking at is the drone reaching, like we are actually capturing some uncertainty and how quickly the drone will reach. The drone will fly like, as the crow flies as opposed to taking the roads. So we expect that it will have a faster travel. So yes, we expect that. So what we do to de-risk is actually, like I said, have other drones to figure out what are the faster routes available. So drones to sense and drones to deliver service. That's the combination that we want to use together. Now, from the human point of view, what we want to say is, once you start training the humans, they become registered responders. Like I said, there's an app that says these are the humans responding. And these humans can be trained in these specific ways. And the training has certain certifications. In fact, it's been found that if people are given CPR, not by doctors or trained nurses, but by regular humans on the road, they have a higher survival rate. So in fact, if you and I, with basic CPR training, see somebody fallen down right here, that person has a higher survival rate with us intervening than not, even if there are trained professionals available. So there's actual data showing that. This is why we want to actually combine these different systems for better service. So I'll stop there. Thank you very much for being such an engaged audience.